Now we're going to be thinking about the second tier of the ART framework, the regulation tier. So in the first tier, the attachment tier, we were talking about how we observe and regulate ourselves. Now we're going to be thinking about how children observe and regulate themselves. Our job is to help them know what they're feeling and learn to manage those feelings. By doing so, we're helping them feel more comfortable in their bodies and helping them reduce the time they spend dysregulated. As we've said before, our best tool for doing this is our relationship with the children. I think we know this instinctively, but there's also scientific proof that connected relationships help regulate the nervous system. In the 1990s, some Italian researchers discovered mirror neurons. So these are neurons in our brains that not only pick up another person's movement, but their emotional state and intentions as well. One writer described them as neural Wi-Fi. Trauma affects mirror neurons as it involves not being seen, not being mirrored, and not being taken into account. Now, of course, all children, depending on what developmental stage they're at, are learning about how they're feeling and how to manage those feelings. But for children who've experienced trauma, there's an added layer. Trauma overwhelms children's capacity to cope, making them disconnect from their own feelings, unaware of other people's feelings, and more likely to express their emotions through actions and behaviours. So what do we do about it? Let's hear from Dan Siegel, who's a psychiatrist in the United States, about what he describes as name it to tame it. It may be, however, that although we're naming their feelings, a child is too dysregulated, operating in their survival brain, to be able to hear us. So what we may have to do to help them regulate themselves first, before we start naming feelings, is to help reduce their arousal level. The best place to start in thinking about this is to think, what do we do when we're agitated or distressed? There are the sort of automatic things our body does, like tapping our fingers, pacing up and down, focusing on our breathing. So what can we do for children to help them lower their arousal levels? Holding or rocking perhaps, putting them in a hammock if they like that, playing with water or sand or Lego, having a safe, quiet space where they can go, deep breathing, relaxation techniques. There is sometimes an assumption that dysregulated children always need calming down, but for some children, their trauma response will be to shut down or cut off or disconnect. So the way to help them become more engaged or connected with their environment will be to provide some quite enlivening activity, like perhaps trampolining or playing ball or playing with a parachute or telling animated stories with different voices. So with these children, we're trying to increase their arousal levels. And then there's helping children alternate between different states. Songs or games with loud and then soft voices, or fast and then slow movements can be good for this, showing children that they can move between different feeling states without having to disconnect or take control. I'm sure you have many, many more examples of activities that you use to help children regulate themselves. Nurseries are often so good at this, and all the routines and rituals around nursery create opportunities for children to learn about self-regulation every day. For example, movement breaks, exercises and calming routines. We know that repetition is an important way that children gain skills. Providing a calming space where children can go when they're dysregulated can be helpful. And plenty of visual support. We know that children pay much more attention to pictures than to words. And lots of thought about transitions between home and nursery, between inside and outside spaces, between staff changes and different activities. We know that the uncertainty of transitions can be triggers for all children, but particularly for children who've experienced trauma. Finally, it's important to remember that children and adults who've experienced trauma may have difficulty reading other people's cues. If you remember what we said about how trauma affects mirror neurons, as it involves not being seen, It also prevents children seeing others clearly. This can present as hypervigilance, or weather forecasting as some people call it, where children will carefully monitor your response to check how you're feeling. It may be they miss social cues, or it may be that they misinterpret things others do as negative, for example, hearing a joke as a rejection or tiredness as anger. But this capacity can be learned by practice, by modelling, and over time by building curiosity and reflective awareness about the emotions they've observed in others and themselves. We're going to end with a video showing something very familiar to you, I'm sure, a teacher helping a child regulate themselves in nursery.